What are your thoughts on using yoga as a tool for self-awareness and personal growth?
So the first thing that comes to our mind when we think about yoga is all body bending asanas, right? They are important, but they are only part of the yoga. In fact, when I read Yoga Sutras, I was very surprised that only 3 or 4 verses in whole Yoga Sutras talk about asanas. So
Okay.
yoga is not about asanas. In fact, line, the first sentence of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra is Atha Yoga Anushasanam, where he says, and now the self-discipline of yoga. Atha means and now, the self-discipline. Yoga Anushasanam. Anushasan, we know this word means discipline. So what he means is the self-discipline, and now the self-discipline of yoga. Now, the point to notice here is that how can a great document like Yoga Sutras, Patanjali Yoga Sutras, which the whole world is now appreciating, right? We have a yoga day, International Yoga Day, starts with and now. And what Patanjali is saying is that now you have tried everything. You went there, you went here, you went to a doctor, you went to a nutritionist, right? You went to a coach, you went to a mentor, you have finished it all. But now you still feel incomplete, and hence, and now the self-discipline of yoga, right? And interestingly, he says that before you start any action, put yourself into yoga. So in fact, in that he says the other way around, that do yoga first and then start your action. But Patanjali says that, you know what, Krishna has told you that, but you're not going to listen to that. I know. You will try everything that you want to try, and then only you will come here. And that's why he's saying Atha Yoga Anushasan. So that's a very interesting thing. How does it impact leaders is because Yoga Sutras only talks about Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga, what it says is that it is primarily a document which is meant to solve those habits or those tendencies which are in a circular fashion. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So Chitta means that aspect of your mind. Vritti, which has become a habit. And when something is an habit, it only becomes a circle. You cannot get out of the habit. If it is some other shape, you will be able to somehow break it. But because it is a circular habit, it is happening again and again. Now yoga will seize those activities which are circular in nature. Okay? So Chitta Vritti. Nirodha. Nirodha means cessation of those vrittis, right? And what yoga does is that it will basically make you more aware. It will make you use your body through asanas. It will make you as leader to be able to regulate your breath in a much productive way, in a much efficient way. But the purpose of yoga is not health. It is a outcome that you derive from yoga. So yoga has 8 components, has 8 limbs. We call it as Ashtanga yoga, right? And the first of the component is yam, then is niyam, then is pranayam, then is asanas, then pratyahar, dharana, dhyan, samadhi, right? So it starts from yam and niyam. Yam means internal discipline, niyam means external discipline. Then comes pranayam. Only when you are disciplined enough can you start doing your breath exercise, breath work. What Western media calls it as breath work is all pranayam all about, right? Now once you have control over your breath will ultimately control your emotions. And therefore once you can sit straight, you are disciplined and you know how to regulate your breath. Let us move to asanas. Asana means, sit in that comfortable posture where you are alert and you can sit straight. Once you can sit straight, only then you can move to further steps. Now for a leader, what is the most important thing in nowadays? The most important thing and the most challenging thing for a leader at work is to handle his stress. And you see, when someone is very stressful, his breath will either become very shallow, he will have no control over his feelings, he will have his body all over the place, right? Now what yoga is saying is that if certain feelings or certain fear can regulate your breath, what if we do it the other way around? What if we regulate your breath and see if it can actually regulate your emotions? So yoga actually works the other way around. So while it regulates your breath, it uses your body as a tool. It ultimately impacts your emotions, and what it does is that it actually, what Yoga Sutra says, and I have not experienced all the aspects of yoga, so it will be very unfair of me to say that it will happen. But I'm sure Patanjali is saying it is 500% true. it will bring you in sync with the whole life around you. You will become that equanimous kind of a person, that you will be so much focused on the process that the fear of result will not come through. The primary reason of stress is the fear of end result, right? But once your breath is in your control, your body is being used as a tool, uh, you will have no fear for the end result. You will be so much dedicated to the process that you will do process so efficiently that results are bound to come. And if for some reason result doesn't come, it is not going to impact you, because your emotions are very well regulated with yoga.
Nishit, can you share some personal anecdotes or experiences from your own life where yoga has been really effective for you?
So in my own life, Pulkit, I had this major issue with self-expression. I'm not a very expressive person. I would always find it very hard to express myself as a leader, right? I would always think that it's okay if others are expressing to me, and I'm very good in understanding others. That's for sure. I'm a very empathetic person by my very nature, but I never found it important to express myself.
Okay.
The other thing is that since I was not able to express myself, my stress management was very poor. Ability to handle stress, because you see, when I'm stressful, I'm not expressing myself. Even when I'm joyful, I'm not expressing myself, right? So it works both ways. Now, if I'm not expressing myself, and if my stress is breaking the roof, as a leader, I'm not going to come across as a very strong leader to my team, because it will show up. My stress is going to show up in some reason or the other,
Yeah.
right? To me, yoga has helped me. I follow a certain aspect of yoga which is called as Kriya Yoga. Kriya means action, so I follow Kriya Yoga. I'm yet to learn yoga, and I really want to learn Hatha Yoga in some phase of my life. But what Kriya Yoga does is that it brings these three aspects, the 8 limbs that I talked about, Yam, Niyama, and Pranayam, which means internal discipline, external discipline, and breath work. It brings in all the three aspects of these 8 limbs, and the other 5 limbs, it brings them as an outcome. It doesn't attack the pranayam, pratyahar, dharana, and samadhi, because they are an outcome of the first 3 steps once you go through them, right? So what Kriya Yoga does is that by involving certain sequences of breath work, of taking out those 30-40 minutes for your own self in the morning, bringing that internal discipline and external discipline within you, and blending it with emotional intelligence, because you are doing all of this, and then you are aware of what you're going through, and then putting them into action. See, if you do all of these things in a day and you go home, you go to work, you are already in a very joyful state. I would not say that you are bubbling with excitement, but what I'm saying is that if you do not do this, you will be in some other state which is not as good as this. But when you're going to work in such state every day consistently, again and again, again and again, you will see your expression will go up. You will start expressing much better than you were expressing earlier. And over that, if you do it consciously, it works. So for me, self-expression and stress management has worked wonders for me. I was already good in interpersonal skills. I was already good in self-perception. The way I have countered my empathy with assertiveness is also which has worked beautifully for me. I was very empathetic, but I was not assertive. Now, it's very common to think that, if you are empathetic, you can't be assertive. That is not true at all. You can be empathetic and you can be very assertive. Right? So that has also worked very well for me.
Amazing. Nishal, this brings me to my final question of this podcast. How can corporates, we have majorly discussed around the individual aspect of things. And the final question, I'd like to put it in a corporate structure, that how can, corporate really bring about the culture of inculcating yoga in a regular office schedule? Then how can they make workspaces a bit more authentic and more amicable for people to be authentic and vulnerable with their peers or their seniors out there? So yeah, with these two questions, I would like to wrap up the podcast.
Right, Pulkit. So I believe, Pulkit, there's a lot to be done on the workplace front. And I believe the human resource has not really developed to that extent in India that they really appreciate yoga or, such tools. It's time till they really start appreciating it, right? They can appreciate it at an individual level, but at a corporate level, it will need some holistic efforts from us, from people like you, from people like me, As a community, we can actually build up a certain presentation or something to stir their humanity. I truly believe that if you approach these workplaces and try to explain how it impacts their productivity, that how the sole purpose of this organization is to make profit, but how can we blend profit and productivity, and how can we ensure that productivity and happiness can work together. High productivity and high happiness is the only way through.
Yep.
And the only way through of high happiness and higher productivity, but with a caveat, happiness first. If they can understand this simple thing, that is the whole purpose of EQ. And I believe if you explain this whole concept through EQ, because yoga is still something which not every corporate will understand. They will understand and they will make it a voluntary kind of an exercise. But I believe if you explain it through EQ and that how it impacts your productivity, and this that it will ultimately mean cost saving for them, and then blend yoga through it, it will make a lot of difference to every corporate. So you go to a corporate and tell them that we can actually reduce your attrition rate by 20%. We can bring up your productivity by 15%. We can jump up the happiness of every employee working here by 25%. Right? And while this happens, imagine the kind of cost savings that you will encounter. But this can only happen through EQ, through yoga. And blending these together, give us 3 months, give us 6 months.
Yep.
And let every employee of you has this ability that they can listen, that they can demonstrate compassion, that they can demonstrate good problem solving skills, that they can demonstrate high level of stress tolerance. Imagine what wonders will it do to your organization. And it cannot happen in a month's time, for sure. It will happen with continuous intervention. It will happen in 3 months. In 3 months' time, you will start seeing some difference. And in 6 months' time, you will see a change in people working, the change in the way they work. So if someone approaches them with that perspective, I think it's very much possible. But I have not seen many people approach organizations with this perspective.
Got it. No, that's a very different viewpoint to this, Nischal, because having worked in the corporate wellness space for nearly 2 years as Aanya Wellness, we used to go and talk pitch to corporates. I totally agree with what you just mentioned, and this is one of the pitches we used to try, and it had the maximum number of conversions happening for us when this particular pitch was presented to the client. But somewhere or the other, and it's a really prevalent problem, which, as you rightly mentioned, needs to be catered in phases. It's not going to be an overnight success in this manner. And consistency is somewhere or the other a problem which I sort of believe has been the case with corporates XYZ. The reasons at times time, profitability, XY, multiple things are there to be looked at. But yes, the overall holistic wellness or the well-being aspect often takes a backseat in corporates, and it's not just about the corporate leadership but also about the employees as well, because sometimes we often found employees, as you rightly mentioned, at an individual level they understand, they appreciate the benefits, but at a corporate level they are hesitant or they are not very much participative with the initiatives that their organization is putting forward. So we have seen both sides of this scenario coming picture.
I also believe, Pulkit, that it has to be measurable. See, who can say that I can measure your empathy? I can measure your reality testing. I can measure your stress tolerance. But today there is a way to measure.
Yeah.
And the beautiful tool, and I would recommend MHS EQ 2.0 tool, which is a beautiful way to measure this. And unlike IQ, I'm not measuring it to compare myself with the other. I'm saying if a global individual who is a perfect individual, as per me, a global, he can be staying in US, he can be staying in Europe, he can be staying anywhere. That global individual, he has an empathy score of 100. You have an empathy score of 80. Right? Now you have this opportunity to build it to 100, 20 points up. He has a score on problem solving of 120. You are at 70. So you have this opportunity to build it to 100 at least. Right? So if you can measure, if you can actually go to these corporates and tell them that everything is measurable, we are not only talking about, it's not something related to emotions only that you can't measure. Now I can measure your empathy, I can measure your assertiveness, I can measure your independence, I can measure your self-actualization. And I will show you that this test, after incorporating this whole tool and holistic well-being practices that we are recommending, it can be yoga, it can be anything. After 6 months, we'll run this tool again and you check the scores. If the scores move up, your productivity will definitely move up. So it's all about how can you make it more, mathematical. I believe the only way to approach corporates and encourage holistic well-being, organization well-being, is to give them numbers.
No, I totally agree on that. And it's rightly said that what gets measured gets achieved.
Right.
So it's really important where, these non-tangible things, if can be quantified, even corporates start to make sense of it. At the end, if you are running an organization, you need to have profitability. Otherwise, you cannot run that organization. So
Absolutely.
that becomes an underlying principle out there. And with this, thanks a lot, Nischal, for coming on the podcast and sharing about emotions as a very important tool for managing ourselves, being authentic to ourselves, and how can yoga be one of the important tools to achieve the authenticity as well as emotional intelligence out there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Pulkit. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Same here. So, listeners, as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to DM us or put them down as comments. And We Are Listening is an anonymous initiative that we run for you guys out there who are looking to find an ear that's ready to listen. As Nishal was also mentioning about listening as a skill. So, yeah, we are here to listen to your problems anonymously. You don't have to reveal your identity, and you will find the links in our description in every episode. So, thanks a lot.